This is for the fighters for change. Oppression would win if they were to give up. Our collective wellness depends on their tireless determination, and legalization's slow burn wouldn't be smoldering without them. They break down stigmas, build up equity, and just say yes. Yes to good troublemaking. Yes to being empowered. Yes to fair access. Now more than ever, Weedmaps says yes and stands with the fighters for change.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Evelyn LaChapelle, and I'll be moderating a very important conversation, reversing the damage of the war on drugs. I'll be speaking with M1 of Dead Prez and Donte Westmoreland, and we are going to be diving into the effects of the war on drugs, how do we move forward, and what can be done in this industry that is booming. And so I will allow M1 to intro himself, and then we'll get an intro from Donte, and we'll get right into this conversation.
Okay. Thank you so much, Evelyn. And it's so nice to meet you, even though for everybody who's seeing this, we did a little chopping up before we started doing this. So I'm really happy to be here. My name is Mutulu Olubala, AKA M1, who's one half of the Tell It Like It Is, Everything is Political rap duo Dead Prez. If anybody knows about Dead Prez or has not heard about Dead Prez, the kind of music that we do is message music. It is oriented or anchored in real community activity. And so I think that's the reason why I'm here, because a lot of times we connect our struggles with those around us, and mine definitely has been affected by the war on drugs. So let's get it in and chop it up.
A couple of months ago, Donte Westmoreland was still in a Kansas City prison serving time for a cannabis conviction. And so to include Donte in this conversation is amazing and a miracle, and also a reminder that our justice system is still doing harm for people of color in the cannabis industry. And so Donte, if you could please give us a brief intro into yourself and your life.
Yeah, Donte Westmoreland grew up out of Stockton, California, not on the best areas. Graduated in 2013 from high school. Went to prison in my early 20s. And now I'm just kind of working what I can do to work for change, man. Bring awareness to the war on drugs, hopefully change these laws out here in the Midwest, and do everything I can just to, put every foot forward.
M1, why cannabis for you? What has brought you into the space? What was your relationship with it? Just why cannabis?
Well, my intimate relationship with cannabis all my life has been one of wonderment. It has been not only the kind of creative inducing experience that came with my interaction, with this particular plant, but also why is it so, depressed? Why is the suppression of cannabis such a huge issue in my community, especially in the face of the hypocrisy that is cigarette smoking and alcohol drinking, and which are, have gone through their own, story and journey. And I think that to me, cannabis has been, that black sheep. Right. And so then also in this space that I'm in now, I've been able to engage in cannabis in a way that allows me to use my political history, which we'll talk about a little bit more, to be in the cannabis space and also use it to shift the narrative and empower. So again, let's elaborate.
Right. I am always interested in shifting the narrative, right? Because I'm learning that we were not the writers of the narrative. And so you spoke about this hypocrisy of and the cannabis being the black sheep, but the hypocrisy really for me is this industry that is booming but is not black and brown, right? And this same cannabis industry that has really destroyed some of our communities with the incarceration rates and the over policing, et cetera. So how do you speak to how do we shift the narrative? And I know you're working on that. And then how do we sort of right the wrongs of this hypocrisy?
Right. Well, let's come back a little bit. I think
that was a lot, right?
We have to draw out and look at this thing globally. And I just want to talk about the war on drugs.
Right.
And what the angle of what has been the war on drugs. And I mean, a lot of people like when we think of drugs, we think of cocaine and crack and and the
now
rest
meth, right.
Even and heroin, definitely. When we look at drugs and its relationship to the Black community, you see a quite a different kind of perspective than you see per se with drugs in the white community or any other community. And the reason why I'd like to pinpoint, and I think what makes me a revolutionary in this is that, we've been impacted by a war on drugs that has created a prison industrial complex. I mean, completely created.
Right.
War on drugs. That hasn't happened to every community. Every community wasn't looked at like a zombie haven, where we got to go in and kick ass and kick the doors down and take the mamas and the babies to prison. That is a lived experience by Black people in America. And so I'd like to make it akin to a word called counterinsurgency. And counterinsurgency means to prevent the unification or the rise or the empowerment to me of our people. And along with like political objectives, you see drugs come and play very clear roles in disempowering our community in so many different kind of ways. And so when we look at it, not just like this kind of like not connected, like drugs are connected to the political economy of the United States and of the world, and the reason why things happen. So I think if we start there, it gives us a good understanding why cannabis is the way it is, So I won't belabor it. I kind of I'll start there. Maybe you can ask, right. Or am I on the right?
You're on the right path, and I'll add to that is because when you're thinking about the war on drugs as a whole, cannabis was always included in that, right? And then but then if you go back and you sort of research this history of cannabis and motorcycle, and you research the history of cannabis, and you realize that prohibition was created out of the suppression of Black and brown people, right? And so, like you said, that whole prison industrial complex built for us, and the drugs sort of funneling that economy, so to say. And so, always encouraging people and folks to research that piece of history about cannabis, because back to shifting the narrative, right? We're shifting the narrative, and it's knowledge and information that I think will normalize cannabis consumption and also destigmatize cannabis consumption. And so in the work that you're doing with People Army and the content, how intentional are you with the destigmatizing and the content that's being created?
Well, okay, so let's hone in on People Army, and which is a great place to go. One, because its specificity is cannabis, and so here I am, a a political rapper revolutionary, creating a platform, a content platform called People Army, which is about shifting that narrative through kind of like a direct impact of social analysis and political education, with it, all entwined with culture, entertainment, and it all, right? So this is what's being delivered by People Army and will be soon. So people out there, what I'm giving you is an introduction. But a part and a branch of People Army is People Army Cannabis or People Army Farms.
Right.
And intentionally, what we are doing to shift the narrative is combining like the space of cannabis, which is broadening minute by minute. I mean, you're seeing so many people jump in and hitting the refresh button around the decriminalization of cannabis and like how it's being seen differently or turned on its ear in different spaces for many reasons, and mainly because of people's ability to exploit cannabis more than they've ever in. So, but here we show up as revolutionaries and as People Army Farms. We want to offer the initiative that if you partake in cannabis, what you can do to empower our community is when you purchase People Army Farms product, a percentage of it will go towards community organizations, political prisoners, towards the direct action or direct impact on projects and initiatives that happen inside our community. We're going to be able to build faster, stronger, in this particular and using this particular space, the same way we would do if we used or engaged in fashion that way, and you had a garment such as this, or if you engaged in sports per se, and you got LeBron James standing up saying, I can't breathe. This is the same way we are engaging in cannabis. So, with social equity in cannabis, with the destigmatization and this space becoming more open and decriminalized, we want to also make it a place where you can come and empower. We not just, and it's okay to just smoke and meditate, but we want you to be able to smoke and empower, or medicate and empower.
Right. I'm glad you said all of that because cannabis is touching so much, right? It's the sports. We've got, was it the NBA or the NFL no longer testing one of the sports? I'm not a sports fan, but I know it happened.
Yes.
So it's touching sports. I even have a hard time calling it cannabis, weed. Right. It has always, been prevalent in our music and in our culture. And then in the movies and the media, we've got the How High and 21 Jump Street and, Cheech and Chong, all of this imagery of, stoner life. But it's shifting. I recently watched a movie called The Gentleman with Matthew McConaughey, and he's taken over the industry, but it looks elegant. It looks different than how they have portrayed us with this plant. Right. And so I tee that up to say, what are your thoughts about how the media continues to play their role in either the decriminalizing or destigmatizing? Because imagery is important, right? And what the public sees is what they start to believe. And so how do you think, where do you think we are today in terms of representation of this plant in the media, and where should we be going?
Yes. Well, I first of all have to say that, for anybody who might not know, white people smoke weed just as much as Black people do, right? So we all, right? And if you don't know, well,
now.
Right? So with that being said, the portrayal of weed in the Black community, to me, has led to the more criminalization of what it means. I was just recently watching a documentary about weed and jazz and weed and hip hop, and you see everybody from Dizzy Gillespie, pontificating about weed, down to I don't know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? And everybody uses cannabis, but it's in the Black community where the excuse is given that, because of this, we can kick in the doors and take us to jail. I mentioned that earlier. But I also have to say that the equity in weed hasn't always been the same either, even though we are the ones who have, we have been, my daughter in the background, pardon. Even though we have, let me catch that thought again. So there's a dual approach to it. In the white community, weed, especially in California, we see all this kind of this liberal space that weed has is supposed to have been. But I have to say that place has been a very segregated place, for whites only, racist, if you will. We think about Humboldt County, and we think about, Mendocino, and we think about these places that are hubs of cannabis, where cannabis is booming. But I have to say that those places are devoid of Black people. If you've ever been, you will rarely, see Black people. But the portrayal of weed in the world shows, Snoop Dogg smoking a doobie. And when the reality is, I think that has to be the shift, of the narrative of what it is. That's what People Army will begin to do, obviously, with the content of it all. But I also have to say, again, it's part and partial and akin to counterinsurgency. There was a time after the 1970s when Dr. Huey P. Newton had introduced the Black Panther Party, where which we're celebrating his birthday today. I don't know when this will air, but we're celebrating the birth of Dr. Huey P. Newton. But I have to say, in '66, after the birth of the Black Panther Party, the United States government suppressed and put out, all of these suppressive techniques, which included drugs, which included heroin. And we saw crack introduced into the community. These were invented, for the downfall for Black people. I mean, now when we watch Snowfall and all these narratives that happen across TV, that was happening to the Black community. That didn't happen everywhere else in the world. And weed is akin to that. So we gotta do a lot to shake off this dirty narrative about how drugs affect our communities. And that's what I'll be working on and have been working on with People Army. You know what I mean?
Right, so, right. And that and that speaks to, when we do it, it looks like Snoop with the doobie, and Snoop, I love him, and he needs to have his, and this is not to say that that's wrong. So, for Snoop to be our portrayal of cannabis in the Black community, but then in the, non-Black community, the portrayal is like a MedMen, a corporate cannabis dispensary. You're walking into dispensaries that look like iPhone stores, and they're not really making place for us in that industry. They're not making, a place for our products on those shelves. And so, in my opinion, reversing this war on drugs, this war on cannabis in particular, part of that there will be a need for this industry to open doors for us. Yeah. Where do you see the industry at now? And then how do we what would be some action items for reversing the war on cannabis in this legal space? How do we, what do we do?
I think, the first thing we have to do is look at cannabis as part of a wellness for our people. It has to be invited in the wellness space, the same way we have exercise and the use of herbs and other alternative medicine and treatment. I think cannabis has to be able to be studied in a really productive way that we can come back with facts about the medicinal uses that we've known for ages, that the ancient, used by the ancients, this same herb found on the grave of King Solomon, that they say, but I think that is where we have to be. I think when we talk about, mental health and wellness, and being able to medicate around cannabis use and the many ways that we can use it, even in women's womb wellness, for all the way to that to dementia and treatment in so many ways.
Anxiety and everything else, right?
Which we've been medicating off for years and doing our own, kind of studies, personal studies. But I think it needs to be done in a way that really allows people into it in a really intimate and personal, yet really medicinal way. So when we start looking at it that way, I think it will even make more sense for us. And to me, that's exactly where cannabis belongs,
Right. Absolutely. And where we should be going. I read a meme a couple months ago, and I've quoted it 1,000 times now, but it said that those who consume cannabis for recreational are consuming for medicinal purposes. They just don't know it, right? And because you come home at the end of the day, you want to, hit your joint or whatever your method is, it's anxiety, you've had a long day, it's a stress de-stressor, me and my friends call it an attitude adjuster, it is wellness, and it's feeding all of this wellness for us. And I would love to see our community open to that portion of what cannabis is, weed is. It's been rebranded. How do you feel about the rebranding of what we grew up calling weed is now being called flower?
Yeah.
How do you feel about the rebranding of that?
Flower and concentrate and all this shit. Look, I'm with all of the shits, right? Let's do it.
Right.
To me, it's the same thing. However, with the rebranding of this, what I don't want to be left out of is the money.
Right.
I don't. I'm happy that
right.
we're out of the closet around weed, right? I don't want to be left out of the conversation as we, and that's why, I'm glad we have Donte in this conversation, because, so many of us do so much time, around cannabis. I mean, the toll of that's taken in our community for something that's celebrated right now on such an enormous scale. I mean, we have billionaire investors, who going wholehearted. We have international governments who are sinking millions and millions into creating this kind of economy that can be regulated. Well, we want in. We are the ones who have been persecuted around this. So with the rebranding, what I'm hoping is that we can find a way that excludes like this kind of gentrification that comes with the corporate and white dollars, way, and we can see this building communities that it has taken from in so many ways. Like you said, we talked about before this conversation, done some time. The same with most of the members of our families have suffered the same kind of fate of consequence around, just kind of the way this has been. But now that we're here, let us all eat from the same table.
M1, it has been awesome talking with you, reversing the damage of the war on drugs. Obviously, there's been lots of damage on our communities, and I appreciate the work that you're doing to reverse that and change the narrative. So if you could just, let everyone know where they can tap in with you, where they can tap in with the People's Army Farm, and where do they get to know about you and what?
Yeah, thank you. Well, again, to anybody who's been following Dead Prez, I want to say thank you for 21 years of Let's Get Free. The journey for freedom and achieving liberation is still going on. And here we are celebrating the birthday of Huey P. Newton. We got Judas and the Black Messiah, about somewhat about the life of Fred Hampton, Senior of the Black Panther Party happening. The revolutionary fervor and the energy is out here. And I think that's also part and parcel to this conversation about reversing the damage of the war on drugs. Again, to me, the word that equates to is counterinsurgency, which has meant, suppressing the rise of our people, about self-determination and being free and throwing off kind of those chains. And I think this conversation about cannabis is central to it. The same way that cannabis smoke has been interweaved in the rooms and conversations around our lives. I think we have to address the elephant in the room, and you have helped us to do that and for us to shift this narrative with this conversation. I'm so happy and honored to be here with Donte and yourself and everybody who put this on, Black Enterprise, Weedmaps. So if you want to look for what's happening with me, again, I've talked about People Army. This is me kind of giving a hint at and alluding to what will be the future of, the content that I will be putting into the world through this platform. So we will engage through art and culture and political education with what we're doing around this, as well as cannabis, and the weed in the People Army Farm bag will also help free political prisoners like Mutulu Shakur, like Sundiata Acoli, and other organizations who are fighting. So this to me is the future of what it means. This is how we empower ourselves, and these are where the conversation starts. So Evelyn, thank you again for having me, and y'all stay tuned. peoplearmy.com coming soon.
To get into the conversation about the harms of the war on drugs and the war on cannabis and how it has truly affected our families and our communities negatively, while sort of corporate cannabis is coming in as the bright and shining light. Can you shed some light on what that incarceration is like? Because what I haven't mentioned in this conversation is that I received an 87-month sentence for cannabis. Corvain Cooper, who's on my shirt, received a life sentence. And I think that it falls on deaf ears in this country that folks are still being prosecuted and serving time for cannabis. Like these are not cases from the 1980s and 1990s, right? We were all, recently prosecuted in the last 7, in your case, 4 years. What is that damage like? What was the damage like, and how does the industry help you recover?
Yeah, the damage is, if you think about a person like me, and of course you, 92 months for a prison sentence for no criminal history is, pretty close to 8 years, especially when you haven't done anything. And you got to realize that you don't only affect, a person's freedom, but you affect a person's family. So in my instance, my brothers went to foster care. My grandmother passed away. I didn't get a chance to bury her. Didn't have a great relationship with my mother. So the things around me were more affected, in my opinion, than it myself, And then when I sit back, when I was sitting in the prison cell and I see that I'm in prison for some marijuana, and it wasn't even that much marijuana, it's kind of an eye opener, kind of makes you want to fight harder. And then, I write these legislators, and these legislators come back and say, I didn't know you people were serving this amount of time for marijuana. And I think it's just a lack of education among the legislators. But it's definitely a lot of change, man. The war on drugs, they got something unique called, if you went to prison for marijuana, it's called social equity. Depending on if you're a resident or even if you're not a resident, you can kind of partner up with somebody and you can have a business. You can be a business owner. Luckily with me, I get out of prison, I get my conviction overturned because they said they wrongfully convicted me. And then once I am released from prison, they dismiss my charges. So everything that unfolds, it's like, I can't get that time back, but what do I do with the time I did get back? My out date was in actual 2025. So they took a significant portion of my life away, a significant amount of memories, but we got to pay attention to the loved ones that this drug affects. And we got to keep going because like how you mentioned, there's over 40,000 people in prison for cannabis, and people's loved ones are aching for them for sure. And let's not to mention the pandemic and COVID.
And it being deemed essential. And so it's like, I mean, I know what it feels like, but I ask this question, for the broader community who doesn't, because I get, I tell people I was just in prison and they're blown away that I was in prison for cannabis.
Yeah.
But you said, it's at the end of the day, you took my time, you overturned my conviction because I was wrongfully convicted for this cannabis.
Mhm.
Where's the repayment? That's my question, right? Like, and I don't have too much faith in our judicial system and our government, all of that. But I do think that this industry as a whole needs to step up and figure out ways to repay those who have paved the way. And so how do you think the industry can do that? And where do you see, how do you think the industry repays, and how do you think that the industry makes a way for those who have sacrificed, 8 years, life, 20, in the case of Michael Thompson, 25 years in this industry? What do you think could be done?
In my opinion, I think they can open up the market for people that are affected by the war on drugs. Yeah, we can't get the time back, but I say if we can be first in line, for a dispensary, first in line in a business like this, in a sense, we're pioneers to the marijuana industry. We're one of the first people that kind of hit the streets with it. I mean, as I look back growing up, I've seen, people's grandmothers selling marijuana. Then you see the older guys, that dress nice selling marijuana. I think marijuana be forever legal until you let these high end, marijuana dealers into the dispensaries and let them sell their product. Before, forever, I think it's going to be a black market. But the people that do decide to do it the business way and lock into the community and give back, I don't see any other scenario why they can be first in line to be a business owner, get that leg up in life. So I think that's how, society could kind of pay back, the people affected by the war on drugs, particularly cannabis.
Absolutely. You spoke about the damage of incarceration really affecting those that we loved. Absolutely, it affected us. Absolutely, we can't get that time back. And absolutely, we were subject to some really harsh environments. But when you think about grandma and your brothers, and I think about my daughter, Corvain's daughters,
Mhm.
um, I know that every move that I make is intentionally to rebuild their lives. And so when you say the industry needs, open the doors for us, I think the industry also needs to understand that this is us rebuilding those lives,
Mhm.
right? And so when you open the door for me or Donte, of course we, want to grow in this industry, but also with the understanding that there were families broken up, right? And the industry needs to take part. So can you, briefly just tell us about sort of that in that mental damage, or that family, how are your brothers, and how does that burden sit on you, being in prison for cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, that burden is heavy. It's like 1,000 bricks. I mean, I'm sitting in a maximum security prison cell, and I have COVID, I'm recovering from COVID. And, I don't know, when I see these guards die, when I see these inmates die, and they worked the unit before, it kind of gives you an eye opener feel of it, the environment around you. You kind of look around and say, hey, I got this virus. Will I be next? And it kind of scary when it's just like, I'm in here for a plant that people are making millions of dollars from. People are opening businesses and paying taxes on, but I'm in prison with COVID, um, with the healthcare that they have, which is sometimes not the best. And it's just like, I don't know what my future holds. And then I sit back, and when in your thinking hours and you think of, you know, my younger brothers, and maybe I won't be able to see them. So, but I fought as hard as I can. Became a, particularly, in a sense, a lawyer, and I was successful of getting out of prison. But it affects so many people, and that burden on you is just something that I don't want. It's not only that you're serving a significant amount of time and you have no criminal history, but it's that moment where you think, will I get home to my family? Will I be able to be that big brother? Because I'm sitting in here with a virus nobody knows anything about, So my plea for help was deeper than just my initial freedom. My plea for help was the initial, getting back into my family's arms.
Right, right. And I'm glad you said that that burden is just extremely heavy. And I want to say I'm proud of you because being proud of because but I don't say it because being proud of you means that I somehow participate and I didn't. But I am extremely what's a better word, just encouraged that when you went to prison, you didn't just sit on the bunk. Like you really had to fight for your freedom, and you really had to go hard for your own freedom, and then you won your freedom. How did that feel, right? Especially, and I'm going to add this, fighting the legal system is usually, financial resources are attached to that. So not having the financial resources and still gaining your freedom, you deserve all the roses and applause for that. Just as we're wrapping, how did the freedom feel when the doors open and you knew that you had done that work to gain your freedom? What was that feeling like?
I mean, just like you said, I know I've done the work. One thing I've noticed about everything, when you pay attention to detail and when you work hard, you do become victorious. So when I was in there handwriting those 165 state legislators, more state reps and senators, and I only get 4 replies, but those 4 replies gave me that energy boost, so I knew I had those 4 in my back pocket with people kind of advocating for me. Of course, Congresswoman Karen Bass, I can't thank her enough. She went to bat for me, my cousin Jason. So as I'm in there studying law from the time I went in to the time I came out, 3.5 years into my 8-year sentence, in a sense, it's crazy to say I knew I was going to go home because how hard I worked, and once I found that loophole and I wrote that motion and, I asked the court to appoint me a public defender. I didn't know who I was going to get, but I know if I presented this material and kind of give him that less work, it could be victorious. And when he got the material, he said, man, this is a great motion. I'm going to file it and we're going to see what happens. And he filed it and the district attorney agreed. They immediately let me out of prison. And it was that feeling that I knew that all my hard work paid off and everything that I was doing was right. Those long hours in a law library in the beginning where you don't understand anything. And then, year 2, everything starts to make sense. And then you learn how to write their language. Of course, I couldn't submit it within myself, but, getting that public defender with that law degree and kind of showing them my view of the way my case is, it made sense and it worked out. And just to kind of get with that district attorney, and I praise him for this and get him to understand what a felony does to a Black man in America, that you could get kicked out your house, you could lose your job. We're already at a disadvantage. When I explained those things to him, it seems like he really understood. And he said, I'm going to dismiss your case and let you be free with no criminal record. So, I mean, that initial feeling of just not only getting that first freedom, but then getting that ultimate freedom, that's a feeling that, you can't explain,
Absolutely. And I'm so happy that you got that freedom and moving forward in freedom. And thank you so much for having this conversation. Can you tell us where to tap in with you? What's in the future? Give us your Instagram handles, because I see and I know the background of great things coming for you in this industry. So can you just let the folks know a few of them and where to tap in?
Yeah, definitely get with me at Instagram at DONTEWEST, Donte West. And just follow me, follow our mission. Me and Evelyn and LPP and, all these people, Weldon, all these people we're on a coalition to, for prison reform and doing things the right way. And thanks, Ryan, for having me. And we definitely got, this is the last, and we can't wait for the society to open back up.
Thank you, Donte, and thank you all for checking us out and listening in on this conversation. Again, my name is Evelyn LaChapelle, the moderator of this Reversing the Damage of the War on Drugs. You can follow my story on Instagram at Evelyn_LaChapelle. I will be launching 87, a cannabis accessory brand. My co-defendant, Corvain Cooper, who just returned a life sentence for this plant, tap in with that story at 40tons.co. I believe that there's great things being done in the cannabis industry right now to reverse the damage of the war on drugs. But I absolutely believe that that is a mission that the entire industry needs to pick up in order for it to move forward. So thank you all for tuning in, and please hit the share button and share this with your entire network, because we're getting the work done and we invite you all to get involved.